Marcus Chen stood in the rain outside the government building, holding a soaked envelope that would change everything. Inside was news about his grandfather's death and something impossible, an inheritance from a war most people had forgotten. The Terran-Virian War had ended 20 years ago when Marcus was just a child. His grandfather, Colonel James Chen, had been one of the few humans to fight alongside alien allies against the brutal Korthak Empire. Most people thought the stories were just old war tales, but Marcus knew better. He had grown up hearing whispers about secret alliances and alien technology. The letter directed him to a remote facility 300 miles from New Geneva. Marcus drove through winding mountain roads, past abandoned military checkpoints that still bore scorch marks from plasma weapons. The rain followed him the entire journey, as if the sky itself mourned his grandfather's passing. The facility looked like nothing special from the outside, just a gray concrete building surrounded by electrified fences. But when Marcus approached the gate, scanners activated automatically. A mechanical voice spoke in perfect English, identity confirmed. Marcus Chen, grandson of Colonel James Chen. Authorization granted for inheritance transfer. The gates opened with a deep mechanical groan. Marcus parked his old hover car and walked toward the entrance, his military boots echoing against wet concrete. He had served 5 years in the Terran Defense Force himself, but this place felt different, ancient, important. Inside, the hallways were lined with strange symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that danced across walls covered in both human and alien writing. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something wild and untamed. A holographic projection flickered to life as Marcus entered the main chamber. It was his grandfather, but younger, wearing a uniform Marcus had never seen before. If you're watching this, then I'm dead and you're about to inherit the most dangerous responsibility in human space, the hologram said. What I'm about to show you must remain secret. The peace between humans and aliens depends on it. The hologram gestured toward a massive vault door at the far end of the chamber. Inside that room is Fenris. He's not just any alien. He's a Virian warbond, the last of his kind. For 20 years he's been waiting for someone worthy to continue our mission. Marcus felt his heart racing. Warbonds were legendary. Alien warriors who could form psychic connections with trusted allies. Most people believed they were myths created by wartime propaganda. Fenris chose to stay with our family after the war. His grandfather's image continued. He's been in stasis, waiting for the right moment to awaken. That moment is now. The Korthak Empire is rebuilding in the outer systems, and they remember what humans and Virians accomplished together. The hologram flickered and began to fade. Be careful, Marcus. Fenris will test you before he accepts you as his partner. If you pass, you'll gain abilities beyond imagination. If you fail... The image dissolved before finishing the warning. Marcus approached the vault door with trembling hands. The biometric scanner recognized his DNA and began the unlocking sequence. Massive bolts retracted with thunderous clanks, and the door swung open to reveal a chamber filled with swirling mist. In the center of the room stood a stasis pod, made from materials that seemed to bend light around them. Through the transparent aluminum surface, Marcus could see a creature that took his breath away. The Virian was magnificent and terrifying. 8 feet tall even while lying down, with sleek silver fur that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Its body was built like a wolf, but larger and more muscular, with hands that ended in razor-sharp claws. Even in stasis, intelligence radiated from its features. Marcus found the release controls and hesitated. Once he opened this pod, there would be no going back. His quiet life as a starship mechanic would end forever, but his grandfather had trusted him with this responsibility. And somewhere in the outer systems, an ancient enemy was growing stronger. He pressed the activation sequence. The stasis pod hissed open, releasing clouds of preservation gas. The Virian's eyes snapped open immediately, brilliant amber orbs that seemed to look straight through Marcus's soul. The creature sat up slowly, every movement displaying incredible grace and barely contained power. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly inside Marcus's mind rather than through his ears. "You are not James Chen," the alien said, its mental voice carrying notes of disappointment and suspicion. "Where is my war brother?" "He died 3 weeks ago," Marcus replied aloud, unsure if the creature could read his thoughts. "I'm his grandson, Marcus. He left instructions for me to wake you." The Virion stood and stepped out of the pod, towering over Marcus. Its amber eyes studied him with predatory intensity, looking for signs of weakness or deception. "James spoke of you in the final days before stasis," the creature said. "He believed you carried the warrior spirit of your bloodline, but belief and reality are different things. I am Fenris, last war bond of the Virion clans. I do not accept partnerships lightly." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as Fenris circled him slowly, like a hunter evaluating prey. The alien's claws clicked against the metal floor with each step. "The Korthax are returning," Fenris continued. "They seek revenge against both our species for the humiliation we caused them. If we are to stop them, I need a partner who can match my strength and share my burden. Your grandfather was such a man. You—" Fenris paused directly in front of Marcus, close enough that his hot breath fogged Marcus's visor. "You remain unproven. What kind of proof do you need?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Fenris's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth designed for tearing metal as easily as flesh. "The same proof your grandfather provided 20 years ago. You must face the trial of bonding. If you succeed, we become partners with powers that can shake the foundations of empires. If you fail—" the alien's mental voice dropped to a whisper that made Marcus's bones ache. "If you fail, your mind will break and I will remain alone until another worthy candidate can be found. The choice is yours, grandson of James Chen. Will you accept the trial?" Marcus looked into those ancient amber eyes and saw the weight of galactic history resting on his shoulders. Somewhere beyond the stars, an enemy was preparing for war. His grandfather had trusted him with this moment, and despite his fear, Marcus knew what he had to do. "I accept," he said simply. Fenris nodded once, and Marcus felt the world begin to change around him as the trial commenced. The world dissolved around Marcus as Fenris placed a massive paw on his shoulder. Reality twisted and bent, colors bleeding together like wet paint in rain. Marcus felt his consciousness being pulled away from his body and thrown into something vast and alien. He found himself standing in a place that couldn't exist, a battlefield that stretched beyond the horizon, under a sky filled with 3 burning suns. The ground was covered in crystalline sand that crunched under his boots, and in the distance, he could see the twisted remains of starships from a dozen different species. "This is the Battle of Kepler's Gate," Fenris's voice echoed in his mind. "The final confrontation between the Alliance and the Korthak Empire. Your grandfather fought here alongside my warpack. This is where I learned what humans are truly capable of." Marcus watched as ghostly figures materialized around him. Human soldiers fighting alongside, alien warriors against creatures that seemed to be made of living shadow. The Korthaks were nightmare fuel given form, with tentacles instead of limbs and eyes that burned with malevolent intelligence. "The trial is simple," Fenris explained as the battle raged around them. "You must experience what your grandfather experienced. Feel what he felt. Make the same impossible choices he made. Only then will I know if you possess the strength to be my partner." Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just watching the battle anymore, he was in it. A plasma rifle materialized in his hands, and he found himself in the middle of a desperate last stand. Alliance forces were being overwhelmed on all sides, and retreat was impossible. A young soldier, barely 18 years old, screamed for help as 3 Korthak warriors surrounded him. Marcus had a choice: save the soldier and expose his squad to attack, or maintain their defensive position and let the kid die. Marcus didn't hesitate. He charged forward, firing his plasma rifle and drawing the attention of the Korthaks. Behind him, he heard Fenris's approving growl as the alien materialized beside him, moving like liquid lightning as he tore through their enemies. But this was just the beginning. The trial shifted, and Marcus found himself facing scenario after scenario, each one testing a different aspect of his character. He had to choose between saving civilians or completing military objectives. He had to decide whether to trust alien allies who might betray him. He had to lead men into battles where victory meant certain death for some of his soldiers. Each choice carved away pieces of his innocence, but it also revealed the core of who he truly was. Marcus discovered that he would rather die than abandon his principles. He would sacrifice himself before allowing innocence to suffer. He would trust alien allies even when it seemed foolish, because building bridges was more important than walls. The final test was the most brutal. Marcus found himself in his grandfather's boots during the moment that ended the war. The Alliance had cornered the Korthak Emperor on his flagship, but the alien ruler threatened to detonate a weapon that would destroy 3 populated star systems unless he was allowed to escape. Your grandfather had to make an impossible choice, Fenris's voice whispered in Marcus's mind. Save billions of lives by letting the Emperor escape, or stop him permanently and risk those same lives. Show me what choice you would make. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Korthak flagship facing the Emperor, a creature of pure malevolence that radiated hatred like heat from a furnace. In the Emperor's clawed hands was a device that could crack planets in half. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and entire civilizations would die. But Marcus saw something his grandfather couldn't have seen 20 years ago. He had grown up in the peace that followed this war, and he understood something about Korthak psychology that the previous generation had missed. Instead of threatening the Emperor or trying to negotiate, Marcus did something that shocked even Fenris. He dropped his weapon and stepped forward with his hands raised. You're afraid, Marcus said to the Emperor. Your entire empire is built on fear, but right now you're the one who's scared. You know your people will never follow a leader who runs from humans and Virians, so you're trapped. Kill those civilians and you prove we were right to stop you. Let them live, and you look weak to your own forces. The Emperor's burning eyes widened in surprise. No human had ever spoken to him like this before. But there's a third option, Marcus continued. Single combat. You and me. Winner takes all. If you kill me, the Alliance retreats and you escape. If I win, your empire surrenders unconditionally. Your people get to see their emperor die fighting rather than running. And you get to die with honor instead of living as a coward. The Emperor stared at Marcus for a long moment, then began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass and screaming metal. You would risk everything on single combat with me? I have killed thousands of your kind. Yeah, but you've never fought a human who wasn't afraid of you, Marcus replied. And right now I'm not afraid of anything. The trial shifted once more, and Marcus found himself in an arena facing the Korthak Emperor in mortal combat. But something had changed during the testing. He could feel Fenris's presence in his mind, not just observing but beginning to merge with his consciousness. The Emperor attacked with claws that could rend steel, but Marcus moved with inhuman speed and grace. Fenris's battle instincts flowed through him, while his own tactical thinking guided their shared body. Together they were something neither human nor Virian had ever been alone. A perfect fusion of strategy and instinct, courage and wisdom. The fight was brutal and lightning fast. The Emperor was incredibly powerful, but he had never faced an opponent who could think like a human and move like a Virian. When Marcus finally landed the killing blow, the arena erupted in cheers from Alliance forces who had been watching the duel. As the Emperor fell, Marcus felt the trial beginning to end. The ghostly battlefield faded away, and he found himself back in the facility chamber, still standing where the trial had begun. But everything was different now. Fenris was looking at him with new respect, and Marcus could feel the alien's presence in his mind like a warm current. The bonding had worked. They were partners now, sharing thoughts and emotions in a way that made them both more than they had been alone. Your grandfather chose to threaten the Emperor with orbital bombardment, Fenris said quietly. It worked, but barely. Your solution was more elegant. You understood that sometimes the greatest victory comes from offering your enemy exactly what they think they want. Marcus nodded, still processing the flood of new sensations that came with the bond. He could feel Fenris's memories stretching back centuries, filled with battles and losses and the weight of being the last of his kind. So what happens now? Marcus asked. My grandfather's message mentioned that the Korthaks are rebuilding. What does that mean for us? Fenris's amber eyes grew cold and dangerous. It means the war never really ended. It just went underground. While humans and other species celebrated peace, surviving Korthak cells have been gathering strength in the outer rim. They've learned from their defeat, and they're coming back with new weapons and new allies. The alien walked to a wall console and activated a holographic display showing star charts of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Korthak sightings and suspected bases scattered across dozens of systems. 3 days ago, they attacked a human research station in the Vega system, Fenris continued. No survivors. Yesterday, they hit a Virian colony ship. The attacks are escalating, and the Alliance governments are too busy with politics to see the pattern. Marcus studied the display, his new tactical instincts already analyzing the data. They're testing our response times and defenses, building up to something bigger. Exactly. And when they're ready, they'll strike at the heart of both our civilizations. Unless we stop them first. Marcus felt a chill of anticipation mixed with fear. His quiet life was truly over now. He was bonded to the last war bond of the Virian clans, inheriting a responsibility that could determine the fate of billions. "Where do we start?" he asked. Fenris smiled, showing those dangerous teeth. "With the one place the Korthax think they're safe. We're going hunting, Marcus Chen. And this time we're not waiting for them to bring the war to us." 2 weeks after the bonding, Marcus stood in the cargo bay of a ship he didn't recognize, watching Fenris examine weapons that shouldn't have existed. The facility had contained more than just a war bond in stasis. It held an entire arsenal of Alliance technology that had been hidden away since the war's end. "Your grandfather was more prepared than even I knew," Fenris said, holding up a rifle that hummed with barely contained energy. "These are prototype weapons from the final year of the war. The Alliance leadership ordered them destroyed, but James kept a few for emergencies. The ship itself was a marvel of human and Virian engineering combined. From the outside, it looked like a standard cargo freighter. But hidden beneath false panels were weapon systems that could punch through a cruiser's shields. The engine had been modified with Virian power crystals that made it faster than anything in regular service." Marcus was still adjusting to the bond with Fenris. Having another consciousness sharing his thoughts was overwhelming at first, but gradually he was learning to appreciate the advantages. Fenris's centuries of combat experience flowed through their connection, while Marcus's human creativity and tactical thinking impressed the ancient warrior. "The first target is a supply depot on Titan Station," Fenris explained, as they prepared for departure. "Intelligence suggests the Korthax have been using it to stockpile weapons for their upcoming offensive. If we can destroy their supplies and capture their plans, we might learn where they're planning to strike next." Titan Station orbited a gas giant in neutral space, officially run by independent traders but actually controlled by smugglers and black market dealers. It was the perfect place for the Korthax to operate without attracting government attention. The journey took 3 days through hyperspace. Marcus used the time to train with his new abilities. The bond with Fenris didn't just give him access to the aliens' memories. It enhanced his physical capabilities beyond normal human limits. He could move faster, react quicker, and his strength had nearly doubled. But the most remarkable change was mental. Marcus found himself thinking in patterns that were both human and Virian at the same time. Complex tactical situations that would have taken him hours to analyze before now became clear in minutes. "Your species has an interesting quality," Fenris observed during one of their training sessions. "Individually, humans are not particularly impressive. But when you bond with others, whether your own kind or aliens like me, you become exponentially more dangerous. Your grandfather taught me that cooperation makes both partners stronger." When they arrived at Titan Station, the place looked exactly like what it was, a haven for criminals and outcasts. The station was a massive collection of modules and docking bays connected by pressurized tunnels, all of it cobbled together over decades without any real planning. Ships of every size and description hung around the station like parasites. Marcus and Fenris docked their freighter in a bay reserved for regular traders. To anyone watching, they looked like a human merchant and his exotic alien bodyguard, a common enough sight in this part of space. The station's interior was a maze of narrow corridors lined with shops, bars, and gambling dens. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of 100 different species mixing together. Music and shouting echoed from every direction, creating a constant background noise that would mask their activities. "The Korthak depot is in Section 7, Fenris whispered through their mental link as they walked through the crowded corridors. "Intelligence reports suggest they're using a warehouse that officially stores farming equipment." They made their way through the station carefully, avoiding the main thoroughfares and sticking to maintenance tunnels when possible. Marcus was amazed at how natural it felt to move in perfect coordination with Fenris. The bond allowed them to communicate without words or gestures, making them incredibly effective as a team. Section 7 was quieter than the rest of the station, filled mostly with storage facilities and industrial operations. The warehouse they wanted sat at the end of a dead-end corridor, guarded by what looked like standard security systems. But Fenris's enhanced senses detected something more dangerous. Korthak scent markers, he warned Marcus silently. At least 6 of them inside, possibly more. They've also rigged the entrance with some kind of energy mine. Walk through that door without disarming it first and we'll be vaporized. Marcus studied the security setup with his enhanced tactical awareness. The mine was well hidden, but now that he knew what to look for, he could see the slight distortion in the air where the energy field waited. Can you disable it? He asked Fenris. Not without alerting them to our presence. But there's another way. Fenris pointed to a ventilation grate near the ceiling. Virian infiltration techniques. We go in from above. The next few minutes felt like the most dangerous game of hide-and-seek Marcus had ever played. He and Fenris moved through the station's air vents like ghosts, following blueprints that Fenris had memorized from the facility's intelligence files. When they reached the warehouse, Marcus could see why the Korthaks had chosen this location. The building was much larger than it appeared from outside, with multiple sublevels that didn't show up on the station's official maps. Crates of weapons and supplies filled every available space. But what really caught his attention were the creatures moving among the crates. The Korthaks looked different than they had in the trial visions. These ones were smaller, more humanoid, but with the same burning eyes and tentacle appendages that marked their species. Shock troops. Fenris identified them through their bond. The Emperor's personal guards were massive, but these are designed for infiltration and sabotage, much more dangerous in confined spaces. Marcus counted at least 8 Korthaks moving through the warehouse, plus automated defense systems that would activate if they were detected. A direct assault would be suicide, but they needed to gather intelligence before destroying the depot. There, Fenris pointed to a computer terminal in a secured office overlooking the main floor. If their operational plans are stored anywhere, it would be there. Getting to the office required crossing 30 feet of open space while avoiding multiple guard patrols. Marcus felt his heart racing as they dropped down from the vents into the shadows between the storage crates. This was where the bond truly proved its worth. Marcus and Fenris moved like a single organism, each anticipating the other's actions perfectly. When a Korthak guard rounded a corner unexpectedly, Fenris was already moving to intercept while Marcus covered their approach route. The alien guard died silently. Its neck snapped before it could raise an alarm. They dragged the body into the shadows and continued toward the office. The computer terminal was protected by encryption that would have taken human hackers days to break. But Fenris had fought alongside Virian tech specialists during the war. His claws moved across the interface with inhuman precision, bypassing security protocols that had never been designed to resist someone with centuries of combat experience. What they found in the files made Marcus's blood run cold. Operation Starfall, he read from the display. Coordinated attacks on 12 major population centers across human and Virian space. They're planning to hit Earth, New Geneva, the Virian homeworld, and 9 other targets simultaneously. The timeline showed the attacks beginning in less than 2 weeks. Each strike force would use weapons that the Korthaks had been secretly developing since their defeat. Planet killer devices that could crack a world's crust and render it uninhabitable. They're not trying to reconquer territory, Fenris realized. They're planning genocide, complete extermination of both our species. Marcus downloaded the files while Fenris kept watch. They now had the intelligence they needed, but destroying the depot was still essential. If the Korthaks realized their plans had been discovered, they might accelerate the timeline or change targets. We need to make this look like an accident, Marcus said. If they think it was sabotage, they'll know someone's onto them. Fenris smiled grimly. Leave that to me. Virian demolitions were always more artistic than human methods. They spent the next hour carefully placing charges throughout the warehouse, focusing on the power generators and fuel storage tanks. When detonated in sequence, the explosions would look like a catastrophic system failure, rather than sabotage. But as they prepared to leave, everything went wrong. An alarm began blaring throughout the warehouse, and emergency lights bathed everything in flashing red. The remaining Korthak guards converged on their position with military precision. How did they find us? Marcus demanded as he and Fenris took cover behind a stack of weapon crates. The computer terminal, Fenris growled. It must have had a silent alarm triggered by accessing certain files. They know exactly what we downloaded. Plasma fire erupted around them as the Korthaks opened fire. The aliens moved with terrifying coordination. using tactics that suggested they had been expecting this kind of infiltration. Marcus and Fenris fought back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered and surrounded. The charges they had placed were on a timer. They would detonate in 10 minutes whether they escaped or not. "The ventilation shaft is blocked," Fenris reported after checking their escape route. "We'll have to fight our way out through the main entrance." That meant facing the energy mine that was still armed, plus whatever reinforcements the Korthax had called for. It seemed impossible, but Marcus had learned something important during his trial. Sometimes the best solutions came from doing exactly what your enemies didn't expect. Instead of running toward the exit, he grabbed a plasma grenade from his belt and hurled it at the fuel storage tanks they hadn't rigged with charges. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Fenris demanded. "Changing the rules," Marcus replied as he activated the early detonation sequence for their charges. "Sometimes you have to blow things up to save them." The warehouse erupted in a chain of explosions that would be visible from orbit. But Marcus and Fenris weren't running away from the blast. They were riding it. Marcus grabbed Fenris and dove toward a shipping container just as the first explosion ripped through the warehouse. The blast wave picked them up and hurled them through the air like leaves in a hurricane. But instead of fighting the force, Marcus used it, angling their trajectory toward the weakest section of the exterior wall. They smashed through steel plating and into the vacuum of space, protected only by the emergency suits they had worn under their regular clothes. Behind them, Titan Station Section 7 disappeared in a ball of fire that lit up the gas giant's atmosphere. Insane human tactics. Fenris growled through their communication link, but Marcus could feel the aliens' approval through their bond. "Your grandfather would be proud." They used their suit thrusters to reach their hidden ship, before station security could respond to the explosion. Within minutes, they were jumping to hyperspace, leaving behind a depot full of destroyed Korthak weapons and very confused authorities who would spend weeks trying to figure out what had caused such a massive industrial accident, but their victory was overshadowed by what they had learned. Operation Starfall was only 10 days away, and they were the only ones who knew about it. "We have to warn the Alliance governments," Marcus said as they reviewed the stolen data. 12 simultaneous attacks on that scale. They need time to prepare defenses. Fenris's expression was grim. "Warning them won't be enough. The Korthak files show they've infiltrated government communications networks. Any official warning we send will be intercepted, and they'll know their plans are compromised." Marcus studied the tactical displays showing the target locations. Earth's orbital defense platforms could probably stop a single attack, but not if they were facing multiple threats at once. The same was true for the other targets. Each one could defend against a normal assault, but Operation Starfall was designed to overwhelm every defense simultaneously. "There has to be something we can do," Marcus insisted. "We can't just watch billions of people die." "There is something," Fenris said slowly, "but it would require us to do the impossible. We would need to coordinate a simultaneous counterattack against all 12 Korthak strike forces at the exact moment they begin their assault." Marcus felt his enhanced tactical mind analyzing the problem. 12 separate battles happening across dozens of light years, requiring perfect timing and coordination, without using any official communication channels. "The old Alliance network," he said suddenly. "My grandfather mentioned it during the trial. The war bonds had their own communication system that bypassed normal channels." Fenris's eyes widened. "The Howling Network. But that hasn't been used in 20 years and most of the war bonds are dead. I'm the last one still active." "But the infrastructure might still exist," Marcus pressed. "Hidden facilities like the one where you were stored. Other war bonds in stasis waiting for partners. Veterans who kept Alliance technology instead of turning it in." Over the next 3 days, they traveled to 7 different star systems, following coordinates that Fenris remembered from the war. Most of the locations had been abandoned or destroyed, but gradually they began to piece together a network of survivors and hidden resources. On Kepler Prime, they found a former Alliance intelligence officer named Sarah Kim, who had been tracking Korthak activity for years without official support. She had documented dozens of suspicious incidents that pointed to the same conclusion they had reached. "I've been trying to get someone to listen for months," Sarah told them as she showed them her research, "but everyone thinks the Korthaks are finished. No one wants to hear that the war might start again." On New Signia, they discovered a maintenance depot that still contained 3 war bond stasis pods. The Virians inside had been sleeping for 2 decades, waiting for partners who never came. But when Fenris explained the situation, they agreed to emerge and help train human volunteers. The most important discovery came on Vega 7, where they found Colonel Maria Santos, Marcus's grandfather's former second-in-command. She had retired to a remote mining colony, but she still maintained a private communication network, connecting dozens of Alliance veterans across human space. James always said this day would come, Maria told them as she reviewed the Korthak intelligence. He spent years preparing for it, hiding weapons and supplies where the politicians couldn't find them. If you're willing to lead this fight, we can give you an army. But time was running out. Operation Starfall was only 5 days away, and they still needed to locate and coordinate with forces near each target system. The scale of the task seemed overwhelming until Marcus had another insight. We don't need to stop all 12 attacks, he realized during a strategy session with their growing team. We just need to stop enough of them to make the Korthaks think their infiltration has been completely compromised. If we can destroy 3 or 4 strike forces and capture their commanders, the rest will probably retreat rather than risk exposure. Fenris nodded approvingly. Choose the targets where we have the best chance of success, and hit them so hard that the Korthaks assume we know about all their operations. They selected 4 targets: Earth, New Geneva, the Virian homeworld of Ashkor, and the industrial center of Tau Ceti. Each location had hidden Alliance assets nearby and defenders who could be trusted with the truth. The plan that emerged was complex but elegant. Each strike team would consist of a war bond pair, a small group of trained veterans, and access to hidden weapons caches. They would position themselves near the Korthak attack routes and wait for the assault to begin. When the Korthaks emerged from hyperspace, expecting to face minimal resistance, they would instead find coordinated Alliance forces ready for battle. Marcus and Fenris would lead the defense of Earth, while the other teams handled their assigned targets. Communication would be maintained through the restored Howling network, allowing for real-time coordination despite the vast distances involved. 2 days before Operation Starfall, Marcus stood on the observation deck of a hidden Alliance base in the asteroid belt beyond Mars. Through the viewports, he could see Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel, unaware of the destruction heading toward it. Nervous? Fenris asked, joining him at the viewport. Terrified, Marcus admitted. 3 weeks ago I was just a mechanic. Now I'm responsible for defending my home planet against an alien invasion. It doesn't feel real. Your grandfather felt the same way before his first major battle, Fenris said quietly. He told me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that something else is more important than fear. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Around them, the hidden base bustled with activity as Alliance veterans prepared weapons and ships that had been mothballed for 20 years. The average age of their force was over 50, but every one of them had fought the Korthaks before and knew what was at stake. Incoming transmission on the Howling network, announced Sarah Kim from the communication station. All teams are in position and ready. Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized the moment had arrived. Across 4 star systems, small groups of Alliance veterans were preparing to face an enemy that had spent 20 years planning revenge. Final intelligence update, reported Colonel Santos over the network. Korthak forces are larger than expected. Each strike group consists of approximately 50 vessels armed with planet-killer weapons. Our forces are outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Marcus felt Fenris's confidence flowing through their bond, steadying his nerves. We've faced worse odds before, the alien said. What matters is not how many ships they have, but whether they're ready for the kind of fight we're going to give them. All teams, this is Marcus Chen, he announced over the Howling network. In 12 hours, the Korthaks will begin their assault. They think they're attacking defenseless civilians. They think the Alliance is weak and unprepared. They think the war is over. He paused, feeling the attention of warriors across 4 star systems focused on his words. They're about to learn how wrong they are. For 20 years, they've been planning this attack in secret, but we've been planning our response even longer. Today, we show them that humans and Virians together are stronger than any enemy. Today, we remind the galaxy why the Alliance won the first war. As the transmission ended, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm settling over him. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by determination and the knowledge that he wasn't facing this challenge alone. The final countdown to Operation Starfall had begun, and the real war was about to start. Marcus stood in the command center of the hidden Alliance base, watching sensor displays that showed empty space around Earth. But he knew that in less than 6 hours, that space would be filled with Korthak warships carrying enough firepower to crack the planet's crust. The final preparations were complete. Hidden throughout the solar system, aging Alliance veterans waited in ships that had been officially scrapped decades ago. Earth's orbital defense platforms had been quietly reinforced with additional weapons and shields. Their crews told only that they were participating in a classified training exercise. Korthak forces detected entering hyperspace, announced Sarah Kim from her sensor station. Multiple contacts bearing directly for Earth. Estimated arrival time 5 hours, 37 minutes. Marcus felt his heartbeat accelerate, but Fenris's calm presence in his mind helped steady his nerves. Through their bond, he could sense the aliens' centuries of combat experience analyzing every aspect of their defensive preparations. All teams. Report status, Marcus commanded over the howling network. New Geneva Defense Force ready, came Colonel Santos's voice. 18 ships and 2 warbond pairs standing by. Ashcore defenders in position, reported another team leader. The Virian home fleet is larger than expected. Apparently they've been secretly building ships for years. Tau Ceti forces ready for engagement, confirmed the 4th team. Local mining platforms have been converted into weapons platforms. The Korthaks are going to get a surprise when they arrive. Marcus nodded with satisfaction. Each team had found ways to strengthen their defenses beyond the original plan. Veterans who had officially retired were emerging from hiding with ships and weapons they had secretly maintained. Former Alliance allies who had pretended to disband were revealing that they had never truly disbanded at all. The Korthaks made one critical mistake, Fenris observed through their mental link. They assumed that peace made us weak. They never considered that we might have been preparing for their return all along. 4 hours later, the first Korthak ships began emerging from hyperspace near Earth. Marcus watched the tactical displays as 50 enemy vessels materialized in perfect formation, their planet-killer weapons already charging for the initial bombardment. But as the Korthak fleet moved toward Earth, they found their path blocked by something they hadn't expected, a defensive line of Alliance ships that shouldn't have existed. "This is Admiral Chen of the Alliance Defense Force," Marcus announced on all frequencies using his grandfather's old rank. "You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences." The Korthak response came quickly, a burst of plasma fire directed at the lead Alliance ship. The battle for Earth had begun. Marcus felt time slow down as his enhanced tactical awareness kicked in. Through the howling network, he could coordinate not just his own forces but all 4 defensive teams simultaneously. The psychic link between warbonds allowed for near-instantaneous communication across vast distances. "Earth Team, execute Pattern Delta," he commanded. "Use the asteroid field to break up their formation." The Alliance ships scattered according to a battle plan that the Korthaks had never seen before. Instead of meeting the enemy fleet head-on, they used the solar system's natural obstacles to create a 3-dimensional battlefield that favored smaller, more maneuverable vessels. Meanwhile, reports flowed in from the other battle sites. "New Geneva engagement initiated," Colonel Santos reported. "Korthak forces are larger than expected, but they're confused by our defensive positions. Requesting permission to execute the Grandfather Protocol." Marcus felt a chill of anticipation. The Grandfather Protocol was one of his grandfather's most dangerous tactical innovations, like a coordinated attack pattern that required perfect timing and absolute trust between human and Virian forces. "All teams, you are authorized for Grandfather Protocol," Marcus announced. "Execute on my mark." The next few minutes became a blur of coordinated destruction. Across 4 star systems, Alliance forces implemented tactics that combined human innovation with Virian instincts in ways that the Korthaks had never encountered before. At Earth, Marcus and Fenris led a strike group that penetrated the Korthak formation and destroyed 3 planet-killer weapons before the enemy could react. The bond between them allowed for maneuvers that no purely human or purely Virian force could have accomplished. "Target the command ship," Fenris advised through their mental link. "If we can capture their invasion coordinator, we'll have access to intelligence about the other Korthak operations." Marcus's ship dove toward the largest Korthak vessel, dodging plasma fire and missile strikes with inhuman precision. Behind him, the rest of the strike group followed in perfect formation, their movements coordinated through the psychic network that connected all the warbond pairs. The assault on the Korthak command ship was brutal and swift. Alliance boarding teams, enhanced by their bonds with Virian partners, moved through the enemy vessel like phantoms. The Korthaks had prepared for many contingencies, but they had not prepared for opponents who could share thoughts and coordinate attacks at the speed of thought. Within 20 minutes, the command ship was captured and its crew taken prisoner. But more importantly, Marcus and his team had gained access to the Korthak communication network. "All teams, we have access to enemy communications," Marcus announced over the howling network. "The Korthaks are realizing that their operation has been completely compromised. Strike forces at 5 other target systems are requesting permission to withdraw." "Let them run," Colonel Santos replied from New Geneva. "We've captured 2 command ships here, and the remaining Korthak forces are in full retreat." Similar reports came in from Ashkor and Tau Ceti. The Korthak forces, faced with coordinated alliance resistance at multiple locations, were abandoning their mission and fleeing to hyperspace. But Marcus knew the victory was only temporary. The captured intelligence revealed that Operation Starfall had been just the first phase of a larger Korthak strategy. Hidden bases throughout the galaxy contained fleets and weapons that made today's attack force look small by comparison. "We've bought ourselves time," Marcus announced to the assembled Alliance forces. "But this isn't over. The Korthaks have been building for 20 years, and what we faced today was just their opening move." Through the howling network, he could feel the determination of veterans and warbonds across 4 star systems. The old Alliance was awakening from its long sleep, and this time it would be ready for whatever the Korthaks could throw at them. "All teams, begin Phase 2 operations," Marcus commanded. "We have prisoners to interrogate and bases to locate. The real war is just beginning." As the last Korthak ships disappeared into hyperspace, Marcus stood on the bridge of the captured command vessel and looked out at Earth hanging peacefully in space. The planet's population would never know how close they had come to extinction, but that was exactly how Marcus wanted it. "Fenris, what do you think my grandfather would say about today?" he asked his bonded partner. The alien was quiet for a moment, his amber eyes reflecting the stars. "I think he would say that you've finally become the warrior he always knew you could be. But more importantly, he would say that the real test is still ahead of us." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settling more firmly on his shoulders. The immediate threat had been stopped, but the captured Korthak intelligence painted a picture of an enemy that was far more dangerous and far more prepared than anyone had imagined. The hidden war that had been brewing for 20 years was finally out in the open, and this time the Alliance would need to be stronger than ever before to survive what was coming. "Sarah, begin analysis of the captured data," Marcus ordered. "I want to know everything about Korthak operations in the Outer Rim. Maria, start reaching out to every Alliance veteran you can find. We're going to need an army." "What about the governments?" Sarah asked. "Shouldn't we brief them on what happened here?" Marcus looked at the tactical displays showing the retreating Korthak forces. "Not yet. The moment we involve official channels, the Korthaks will know exactly how much we've learned about their operations. For now, this stays within the Alliance veteran network." Through the howling network, he could feel agreement from the other team leaders. They had all learned during the original war that sometimes the most important battles had to be fought in the shadows, away from the politicians and bureaucrats who might compromise their operations. "All teams, maintain communication blackout with official channels," Marcus commanded. "As far as the governments know, today's attacks were random pirate raids that were repelled by local defense forces. We'll handle the real war ourselves." As the Alliance ships began the long process of securing prisoners and analyzing captured technology, Marcus felt a strange sense of completion. 3 weeks ago, he had been a simple mechanic with no knowledge of his family's legacy. Now he was the leader of a secret military operation that spanned multiple star systems. But more than that, he had found his purpose. The bond with Fenris had shown him that he was capable of things he had never imagined, and the responsibility of protecting billions of lives no longer felt overwhelming. It felt like exactly what he was meant to do. 3 months after Operation Starfall, Marcus stood in the heart of a facility that officially didn't exist. Hidden deep within an asteroid in the Centauri system, the new Alliance Command Center buzzed with activity as intelligence analysts, tactical planners, and veteran warriors worked around the clock. The captured Korthak data had revealed something that chilled Marcus to the bone. Operation Starfall hadn't been the Korthak's main assault. It had been a test to measure Alliance response capabilities. The real invasion force was 10 times larger and hidden in a section of space that no government had ever explored. The void reaches, Fenris explained as he and Marcus studied the holographic star charts, a region beyond the galactic rim where space itself seems to bend strangely. The Korthaks have been building there for decades, using technology they salvaged from species they've conquered. The intelligence painted a picture of an enemy that had learned from their previous defeat. Instead of relying on brute force, the new Korthak strategy involved gradual infiltration of key systems, corruption of government officials, and the systematic weakening of Alliance defenses. They've been playing a game that lasts decades, observed Colonel Santos during one of their briefings. While we celebrated peace, they've been turning our own people against us. The evidence was overwhelming. Korthak agents had infiltrated defense contractors, government agencies, and even military commands throughout human and Virian space. They had sabotaged research projects, delayed military upgrades, and ensured that any warnings about their return would be dismissed as paranoia. 12 governments across 7 species, all compromised to some degree, Sarah Kim reported as she presented the latest intelligence analysis. The Korthaks have been incredibly patient, spending years building networks of influence and control. Marcus felt the weight of the revelation settling on his shoulders. They weren't just fighting an alien invasion, they were fighting an enemy that had already conquered much of the galaxy from within. "How many people can we trust?" he asked during a strategy session with his core team. "Fewer than we hoped, more than the Korthaks expect," Fenris replied. "The veteran networks have remained mostly clean because we operated outside official channels. But active military units, those are compromised at the highest levels." The solution Marcus proposed was radical even by Alliance standards. Instead of trying to work with corrupted governments, they would build a completely independent military force using resources and personnel that the Korthaks didn't know existed. Over the following weeks, ships began arriving at hidden bases throughout the galaxy. They came from everywhere. Aging veterans who emerged from retirement with vessels they had secretly maintained, alien allies who had been quietly building fleets for decades, and younger volunteers who had been recruited through carefully screened networks. The most remarkable discovery came when Marcus and Fenris traveled to the abandoned Alliance research station where the original war bond program had been developed. They found not just historical records, but active stasis pods containing dozens of war bonds who had volunteered to wait for the inevitable Korthak return. "We knew this day would come," explained Kira, "the first war bond to be awakened. The Korthak's culture demands total domination. They could never accept permanent defeat." Within days, they had recruited and bonded 12 new human Virian teams. Each partnership brought unique abilities. Some specialized in infiltration, others in space combat, and a few possessed talents that even Fenris found impressive. But the most important breakthrough came when they discovered that the Warbond network could be expanded beyond its original parameters. Working with Alliance scientists who had been secretly developing psychic enhancement technology, they found ways to create temporary bonds with other species and even with advanced artificial intelligence systems. The Korthaks have been thinking in terms of conquest and domination, Marcus realized during a breakthrough strategy session. But what if we approach this as a cooperation problem instead? What if we can build alliances they can't even comprehend? The plan that emerged was ambitious beyond anything the original alliance had attempted. Instead of fighting the Korthaks with traditional military tactics, they would create a galactic coalition based on voluntary psychic bonds between willing participants from hundreds of different species. The first test came when they made contact with the Etherian Collective, a group of energy-based beings who had been hiding from the Korthaks for centuries. The Etherians possessed technology that could disrupt Korthak communications and navigation systems, but they had always been too fragile to participate in direct combat. Through temporary bonding with human partners, we could provide our technology while you provide physical presence, the Etherian ambassador explained during negotiations. Together we become something neither of us could be alone. Similar agreements followed with the Christech engineers, the quantum nomads, and even the mysterious Void Touched who existed partially outside normal spacetime. Each alliance brought new capabilities and new ways of thinking about the Korthak problem. Marcus found himself at the center of a growing network that spanned dozens of species and hundreds of star systems. The bonds weren't permanent like his connection with Fenris, but they allowed for unprecedented coordination and cooperation between radically different forms of life. The Korthaks have spent 20 years preparing for war against the alliance they remembered, Fenris observed as they watched the coalition forces training together. They have no idea what they're really going to face. The moment of truth came 6 months after Operation Starfall, when long-range scouts detected the first elements of the main Korthak invasion force moving toward civilized space. The enemy fleet was massive, over 10,000 ships of various sizes, all armed with weapons that could devastate entire star systems. But more disturbing was the intelligence about Korthak leadership. The invasion wasn't being led by traditional military commanders, but by something called the synthesis, a fusion of Korthak consciousness with technology, from conquered species that created a hive mind of terrifying intelligence and ruthlessness. They've become something new, Marcus realized as he studied the sensor data. This isn't the same enemy we fought 20 years ago. They've evolved, adapted, become something that traditional tactics can't defeat. The final battle preparations took place across hundreds of systems simultaneously. Unlike the desperate defense of Operation Starfall, this time the Alliance coalition was ready with strategies and technologies that the Korthaks had never encountered. Marcus stood on the bridge of the new flagship Unity, a vessel that incorporated design elements from every species in the coalition. Around him, crew members from dozens of different worlds worked in perfect harmony, their minds linked through the expanded Warbond network. All coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen, he announced as the Korthak fleet approached the edge of civilized space. Today we face an enemy that believes conquest is the only way to interact with other species. We're going to show them a different path. Through the psychic network, Marcus could feel the determination of beings across hundreds of light years. Humans and Virians, Etherians and Christech engineers, AIs and energy beings, all united by bonds of cooperation rather than domination. The Korthaks think they're facing the alliance they defeated 20 years ago, Marcus continued. But we're not that alliance anymore. We've learned that our greatest strength comes not from our weapons or our ships, but from our willingness to trust each other and work together. As the massive Korthak fleet crossed into Alliance space, they encountered something that defied their understanding. Instead of meeting traditional resistance, they found themselves facing a coalition that seemed to anticipate their every move, counter their every strategy, and adapt to their tactics faster than their synthesis commanders could process. The final war between the Korthaks and the galaxy had begun, but this time the rules had completely changed. And Marcus, bonded with Fenris and connected to hundreds of allied minds, stood at the center of humanity's greatest gamble. All forces, execute Coalition Protocol 1, he commanded as the enemy fleet moved into weapons range. Show them what cooperation really means. The battle that would determine the future of galactic civilization was about to begin. The final battle began not with traditional weapons fire, but with something the Korthaks had never experienced. A coordinated psychic assault from hundreds of bonded minds working in perfect harmony. Marcus felt the power flowing through the coalition network as beings from across the galaxy shared their consciousness, their knowledge and their determination. Through his bond with Fenris and connections to the expanded alliance, he became something more than human, a focal point for the collective will of dozens of species. The Korthak synthesis tried to counter with their hive mind technology, but they discovered that domination-based consciousness couldn't match cooperation-based awareness. Where the synthesis forced unity through conquest, the coalition achieved it through voluntary partnership. Their command structure is fragmenting, reported Sarah Kim from the sensor station. The synthesis can't process the complexity of our coordinated responses. It's like they're trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape. Marcus watched the tactical displays as coalition forces engaged the massive Korthak fleet. What looked like chaos to outside observers was actually a carefully orchestrated dance. Human ships provided tactical flexibility, Varian vessels brought predatory instincts. Etherian allies disrupted enemy communications, and Christek engineers created defensive barriers that shifted and adapted faster than Korthak weapons could target them. But the most devastating weapon in the Coalition arsenal was something the Korthaks couldn't defend against, and the ability to offer their enemies a choice. All Korthak vessels. This is Admiral Chen of the Galactic Coalition. Marcus broadcast on all frequencies. We know that many of you are fighting against your will. The synthesis has enslaved your minds, but we can offer you freedom. Any ship that ceases hostilities and requests sanctuary will be granted safe passage and assistance in breaking the mental bonds that control you. The response was immediate and devastating to Korthak morale. Nearly a quarter of their fleet broke formation, as individual commanders realized they could choose cooperation over conquest. The synthesis tried to maintain control, but the psychic network of the Coalition was already reaching out to offer alternatives. The void touched our reporting. Strange readings from the Korthak. Command ship, announced one of the Coalition coordinators. Something is trying to communicate directly with Admiral Chen. Marcus felt a chill as an alien presence touched his mind. Not through the warm cooperation of the Coalition network, but as a cold, calculating intelligence that felt utterly foreign. Human leader, came a voice that seemed to speak from the vacuum of space itself. I am the synthesis. You have impressed us with your creativity. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. Through his bond with Fenris, Marcus felt the alien's warning. The synthesis was not capable of true negotiation, only temporary tactical adjustments while it planned new forms of attack. What kind of accommodation? Marcus replied, while simultaneously coordinating Coalition forces through the psychic network. Partition, the synthesis responded. Your Coalition can retain the inner systems while we claim the outer rim for expansion. Both our species can coexist without interference. Marcus felt the temptation of the offer. It would end the immediate threat and save billions of lives. But through the Coalition network, he could sense the experiences of species that had accepted similar deals with the Korthaks in the past. The result was always the same. Temporary peace followed by gradual conquest as the Korthaks broke their agreements piece by piece. Counteroffer, Marcus replied. Complete withdrawal of Korthak forces beyond the galactic rim, with the understanding that any return will be met with Coalition response. In exchange, we provide humanitarian aid to Korthak civilian populations and assistance in developing non-conquest-based government systems. The Bayane synthesis paused for exactly 3.7 seconds, long, enough for Marcus to coordinate a devastating combined assault on the Korthak command structure. Coalition forces struck with precision that defied normal tactical understanding. Human creativity identified weak points. Varian instincts guided attacks. Etherian technology disrupted defenses, and quantum nomad vessels appeared inside enemy formations without traveling through normal space. But the most effective assault came from the war bond pairs themselves. Marcus and Fenris led a strike directly at the synthesis command ship, accompanied by 11 other bonded teams whose combined abilities allowed them to penetrate defenses that had never been breached. The boarding action was unlike anything from the previous war. The synthesis had transformed the interior of their ship into a living computer system where biological and technological components merged into something that was neither fully alive nor fully mechanical. The synthesis isn't just commanding the Korthak forces, Fenris realized as they fought through corridors that shifted and adapted around them. It is the Korthak forces. Every ship, every soldier, they're all extensions of the same consciousness. Marcus felt horror and pity as he understood the implications. The Korthaks hadn't just embraced conquest as a philosophy. They had sacrificed their individual identity to become part of a collective that knew only domination and expansion. The final confrontation took place in the heart of the command ship, where the original synthesis core waited. It was a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with the combined consciousness of billions of absorbed minds. Korthaks and conquered species alike, all forced into unity through technological domination. You cannot destroy us, the synthesis declared as Coalition forces surrounded the core. We are unity itself. We are the inevitable future of all consciousness. Perfect order achieved through absolute control. You're not unity, Marcus replied, feeling the warm support of the Coalition network flowing through him. You're the opposite of unity. You're isolation disguised as connection. Through the War Bond network, Marcus reached out not to destroy the synthesis, but to offer it something it had never experienced: true voluntary cooperation. The psychic touch of the coalition met the enforced unity of the synthesis, and for a moment, billions of enslaved minds felt what freedom meant. The result was catastrophic for the synthesis command structure. Across the Korthak fleet, individual commanders began breaking free from the collective control as they experienced the possibility of choice. Ships stopped firing, formations collapsed, and the monolithic unity of the invasion force shattered into thousands of individual decisions. Some Korthak vessels chose to continue fighting, but most simply stopped, their crews struggling to remember what individual thought felt like. A few even began broadcasting requests for asylum and assistance. In breaking the technological bonds that had enslaved them, the synthesis core itself began to crack as the conflicting desires of its absorbed consciousness finally overwhelmed the control systems. Marcus felt a moment of profound sadness as he realized that the core contained not just Korthaks, but representatives of dozens of species that had been conquered and absorbed over the centuries. "Can we save them?" he asked Fenris through their bond. "Some of them," the alien replied. "The coalition network can help them remember who they were before they were forced into the synthesis. It won't be easy, and not all of them will survive the separation, but we can try." The next several hours became a rescue operation on a scale that had never been attempted. Coalition forces worked to separate individual consciousness from the synthesis while providing humanitarian aid to Korthak crews, who were experiencing individual thought for the first time in decades. Marcus found himself serving as a conduit for the liberation process, using his connection to the coalition network to help freed minds find their way back to individual identity. It was exhausting work that pushed his psychic abilities to their limits, but gradually they managed to save thousands of beings who had been enslaved by the synthesis. When the immediate crisis was over, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Unity and looked out at a very different galaxy. The Korthak invasion force was scattered and demoralized, but more importantly, it was no longer unified by the compulsion to conquer. Individual ships were making individual choices about their futures. Some chose to return to the Outer Rim and attempt to rebuild Korthak civilization without the synthesis. Others requested asylum and assistance in integrating with coalition worlds. A few even volunteered to help establish new forms of government based on cooperation rather than domination. Status report. Marcus requested from his command staff. "Korthak military threat has been neutralized," Colonel Santos reported. "Remaining hostile forces are retreating beyond the galactic rim. Coalition casualties were minimal thanks to the coordinated response. More importantly," added Sarah Kim, "we've established first contact with 17 species that the Korthaks had conquered or enslaved. They're all requesting membership in the coalition." Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he realized what they had accomplished. They hadn't just won a military victory. They had proven that cooperation could triumph over conquest, that voluntary unity was stronger than enforced control. "What happens now?" he asked Fenris through their private bond. "Now we build something better," the alien replied. "Your grandfather's war ended with victory over the Korthaks. Your war has ended with the possibility of peace for everyone, including the Korthaks themselves." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same government building where his journey had begun. But this time he was there for a very different purpose. The secret war was over, and it was time to integrate the coalition with the official governments of civilized space. The briefing to the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Marcus presented evidence of the Korthak infiltration, the coalition response, and the successful defense of dozens of star systems. But more importantly, he demonstrated the psychic network technology that had made their victory possible. Voluntary psychic bonding between willing participants from different species, he explained to the assembled representatives. It allows for unprecedented cooperation and understanding. It's what turned a desperate defensive action into a galactic coalition. The Council's response was mixed. Some governments embraced the technology and requested immediate integration with the coalition network. Others were suspicious of anything that involved sharing consciousness, even voluntarily. But the results spoke for themselves. Systems that joined the coalition experienced dramatic improvements in interspecies cooperation, technological development, and conflict resolution. Within a year, the network had grown to include most of civilized space. Marcus kept his role as Admiral of the Coalition Defense Force, but he also returned to his original passion for mechanical engineering. Working with beings from dozens of species, he helped develop new technologies that combined the best insights from across the galaxy. "Do you ever miss the simple life?" Fenris asked one evening as they worked on a new type of starship engine that incorporated both human innovation and Virian instincts. "Sometimes," Marcus admitted, "but I think I was always meant for something bigger than just fixing ships. My grandfather saw that even when I couldn't." Through their bond, he felt Fenris's contentment. The last war bond of the Virian clans was no longer alone. The Coalition network had created dozens of new bonding relationships, and the techniques were being taught to volunteers from species across the galaxy. "Your grandfather would be proud," Fenris said quietly. "You didn't just honor his legacy. You created something entirely new, a galaxy where beings choose to work together instead of being forced to fight each other." Marcus nodded, feeling the warm presence of the Coalition network in the back of his mind. Across hundreds of star systems, billions of beings were connected through voluntary bonds of cooperation and mutual support. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts and disagreements, but it was something unprecedented in galactic history. The talking alien wolf that had been his grandfather's legacy had become the foundation for humanity's greatest achievement. And in a universe that had once seemed destined for endless conquest and war, cooperation had finally found a way to triumph. The real victory wasn't that they had defeated the Korthax. It was that they had shown everyone, including their former enemies, that there was a better way to live among the stars.